Anybody work with analysis services? Okay. And reporting services. Okay, good. So, what about that Power Query within Excel? You guys work with it much?
Play with it.
Do you have users that are curious about this Power Query? A little bit. Yeah. It's a bit of a paradigm shift, and that's, you know, it's not for everybody, right? But if you've got the users that have the business skills and the technical ability, we've seen people that are really, really happy with this. So this is the agenda for today. And for the longest time, since what, late 2013, it's been called Power BI for Office 365. And really that was all the tools within Excel that was for authoring, and then you would publish it to a Power BI site, which is a SharePoint site with some added functionality in SharePoint Online. They've started just recently within the last 3 months. They've got a standalone, which they call the Power BI Preview, right? So there's kind of two branches of development right now. They hope to merge them in Q3. Calendar Q3, but because of this, people are so interested in it, but they don't want the Office 365 subscription. That's why they've got these two branches right now, and each does some different things, so I can't promise what features they'll merge from both. But as at the time of this presentation, Excel was the center of the universe for mashing up data and publishing data. They now have a standalone called the Power BI Designer, and I'll talk about that as well. So Power Query is a downloadable add-on to Excel 2013. It can't be installed with 2010. Power Pivot and Power View just have to be enabled. It comes with 2013. I think the Power View can be installed as an add-in on 2010. You'll see that development path on the top, that Power BI Designer, it's in preview, and they update it monthly. It's supposed to be everything combined into one, Power Query, Power Pivot, and Power View. The Power Pivot functionality is very limited. You can only do relationships and some calculations. That's it. So if you were looking to create hierarchies within a table, you can't do that yet. So you do all that, you basically, those first three arrows lead to publication. So you get the authoring, and then you lead to the publication. So, like I said, in late 2013, it was the Power BI sites. Now they've got the Power BI Preview. It's supposed to be all HTML5. Some functionality works, some doesn't. So they're claiming it comes out for Power BI for mobile. They did just last week come out with the modern application for the Power BI Preview. So why has Microsoft invested a lot of money in these tools within Excel? So for those that work with reporting services, you've got your user-defined parameters all set up. You even expose some ability within the report builder, and your users just end up dumping it into Excel as fast as they can with some sort of static snapshot, and then they have to recreate that every month, and then they're mad about it. So Microsoft said, all right, for the users that have the ability, we're going to give them the tools. But that kind of introduces this new role within the organization, that first person. Steward, the data steward, I love their naming, and Anna, the analyst, Joe, the pro, I guess. Steward is this new persona of Power BI, and he's that person that knows the business data upside and down, but he also has the technical ability to work with us, okay? So he knows what to ask for, he knows what he needs, and he knows how he wants to use this data. So they're calling this SSIM, Self-Service Information Management. So if you do have users that are dumping everything into a Excel spreadsheet, or they've got some sort of pivot table set up and they have to recreate it all the time, or they have to hold their mouth just right when they copy and paste into whatever thing they've got set up. This is to get rid of that. This is the normal way of setting things up, and we're just adding that data steward in between. With this role, you can actually, in Power Query, and I don't know how many people have played with it, but if you've got the Office 365 licensing, you can actually publish your queries to a data catalog. So all those steps that you've set up, somebody can just grab it, refresh it, and it goes through all those steps to mash up the data, make it clean. So this data steward role is not to be taken lightly. And what I've found out in most of our proof of concept installations is that it's usually somebody pretty high up in the management chain, but still has that technical ability. You know, they've been working with spreadsheets a lot. They've been working with the data. They know how it should look. They know immediately when something's wrong with the data. And that's just kind of how it's gone. It's been actually very, very high level management, like even up to the CIO. Because ultimately what we're doing is creating this simplistic dashboarding system that you can then drill down into if you need to. But the CEOs really like the CIOs really like the ability to look at the dashboards. So looking at this self-service information management, that data catalog I was talking about, that's if you have the Office 365. It does not come with the standalone. You've got the authoring for it. And typically on our end, we're going to have to manage access to this, and they've added a data management portal within Office 365. You can set up gateways, data sources, and set up roles for people that are able to author and publish, and for people that are able to see the data and refresh the data. And then we've got the data management portal is actually all part of that. And actually I misspoke. That's within the admin center. The data management portal is for the people that have published queries. You can actually see if people are actually using that, your queries, and see how often and who. This is kind of a high-level look at how data is published. The data management gateway is basically like a VPN endpoint into your network, and it exposes everything based off whatever service account you've given to the data source. So it's kind of scary. The analysis services connector preview is a connection you can put on your host in your network, and it actually uses Active Directory, and it can get down to row level security, but right now it's only available for tabular models. So that's right now the analysis services connector preview, that's only in preview, the Power BI preview. So really it makes it a whole lot easier for the report creator, because they can search for data that's wrapped up in a query within their organization. Now, there's also a lot of public data that Microsoft's bundled into nice queries too, but really it's for this internal data. They can see, hey, this has been published by, Johnny Steward, and I know that he's got the right data. Let me pull it in and start to play with it. The data steward, I don't know if he benefits because we're giving him a lot of work, right? But he doesn't have to do a lot of back and forth with recreating the wheel every month. And obviously, like I said, the CIO and the CEO love the interoperability of the dashboards. I kind of already talked about the flow chart of creating the report. Power Query, you can do a lot. It's got, they're adding functionality to it almost on a weekly basis, and data sources almost on a weekly basis. So if you follow the MSDN blog, it's pretty exciting how much development they're putting into this. Not only mash it together, but you can add columns, you can put conditional logic in with it. And And Power Pivot, obviously, everybody's worked with it for modeling their data. It's basically like tabular models within Excel. It's the same engine. And the Power View, I don't know if many people have worked with it, but it's the basically like the pivot charts. It's the reporting system of this. It's going to help you create your dashboards. And you publish. Honestly, I've got a division doing GIS development, so I haven't worked with PowerMap, but it is pretty cool. But most of my analysis is done in Esri products. And Q&A, it actually allows the end user to just start asking questions. And if you've set it up correctly, it gives you some pretty good answers. And I'll show you where to do that within Power Pivot. And obviously HTML5. Power BI Designer is those first three, but the Power Pivot is limited. And like I said, enable Power Pivot and Power View. Power Query and Power Maps are downloadable. I think now you've got data to access data, the data tab, the Power Pivot add data to model to add data, and now they recommend using Power Query to add data as well. Awesome, 3 ways to do them. Looks like in 2016, Office 2016, they're going to roll Power Query into the data tab. Because really that's where you do most of your work when you're setting up data sources and connections to it. I'll show you a demonstration of Power Query. Everybody knows Power Pivot. The cool thing about Power View is you can set your filters to the page level or to the chart level, but everything on the same page, as long as it's got a relationship, is interactive together. So if you click on one chart, the other chart responds. Like I said, Power Map's cool. There's actually mapping features within the Power View charts. This is just a way to set up a tour through that data. The designer is now downloadable for free if you want to start mashing up data with online sources, or if you've got a tabular model on-prem, start to play with it right now for free. And the Power BI dashboard, what they call the preview, that's free as well. Just as long as you've got an organizational account, start playing with it. And that is not, most of the Power BI sites show the dashboarding and the Q&A. Well, the Q&A is actually right up here by default, right on your dashboard. So you can just start asking questions. Now, Power BI Sites, this is within the SharePoint realm of it, so this is the other branch of development. It's the more mature branch, and this is the site that uses the data management gateway sources. So you can actually set up a scheduled data refresh within your site. So it's a little bit different than going into your data properties, connection properties, and setting that connection. This is actually, because it's in the cloud, has to know that it's using the gateway. So you have to set up the refresh within the website, the site. So that's a little bit inconsistent. So your user has to know, all right, am I in Excel services? Am I in a Power BI site? What's my source? They're working on that. They're aware of the problem. But the data refresh is inconsistent across Excel services, Power BI sites, and Power BI preview. Q&A is pretty fun. You can actually get to some questions, and it will help you along the line. It's actually get this helper to show you what it's actually doing in the background. I'll show you that. The modern UI is out. The universal app will not come out until the general availability in Q3. But they do have the modern UI app for both the sites version and the preview version. And that might confuse users. I get a lot of calls saying, well, I've got the preview set up and it's asking for a SharePoint site. What do I do? And that's just because they downloaded the Power BI sites version. The only way I can tell them is the sites version's green, the preview's yellow. that helps them. So, all right. So the two ways: data management gateway and the analysis services connector. The gateway is just like that endpoint. You set up your data source with a service account, and that service account has access to everything it has access to. So whoever has access to that data source can see everything that service account can. You can have up to 200 gateways per network. They just recently, within the last 2 months, added instances on your gateways. And I think this is to lessen the burden of having to put 200 applications on 200 different hosts. So if you have, say, if you want to set up a different connection to the same source with a different count, you actually need a different instance for a different gateway. And I don't know why 200 is the limit, but that's strange. And like I said, the analysis services connector uses Active Directory and can do row-level security. And it actually gives you real-time queries if your model's set up with direct query. Now, if you've got a complicated query in the background or a complicated view or whatever, that's putting quite a burden on your server. So however fast your server is getting back that data, we've got a view that takes 8 seconds, right? But when you start clicking on charts in a website, 8 seconds feels like forever. So you got to be careful with that. And they do recommend the APS. Of course, Microsoft recommends the $500,000 device to help take care of that speed, but that does work quite nicely. The cool thing about the data management gateway is that you can enable OData feeds to your corporate data. Those OData feeds can be protected by Active Directory. So that's pretty cool. And you can make them public if you want to. I don't know why you would. Just basically a conceptual model. Those colors are terrible. So with the gateway, typically it's the database account or whatever service Active Directory account you've got. All it needs is data reader access. The online, when it's coming through, basically looking at that endpoint and sending the request through there. So it's got built-in self-signed certificates, but you probably want your own. Yes?
Which Power BI site which of these things are like fully downloadable locally or you should rely on 65?
Okay. You can do a lot of the work within Excel, and basically the online stuff is only for publishing. So you don't have to have Office 365 or the standalone Power BI preview. If you just want internal stuff where you're sharing queries and sharing workbooks in your own SharePoint, it's fine. The problem
use anything from
what do you lose? You lose the ability to schedule refreshes within Office 365 based on the Power Queries. And the reason they did that is because they can publish those queries and then they can be consumed and then refreshed. But yeah, if you're looking, you don't need, if you're just publishing. If they know how to refresh the data and they're on their own network, it's fine. Right? So when we're talking about the Office 365 Admin Center, what all do you need to know for this? So this is where you monitor your gateways. This is where you have your keys to your gateway. So if one fails, you just copy that key, install the gateway on another host, put the key in there, and it's already up and running with the configuration within the cloud. configure the roles about access to those sources and the ability to refresh the data. It's pretty hard to see, but basically this box here, they've created, if you've got Active Directory, DIRSync as your Active Directory, and it's the dir sync, you can use this Azure service bus, and that's what handles the request to your on-prem data, and that's why you can use row-level security with Active Directory. So they realized the pipe on the DMG was too big. Let's make it a little more refined, and it goes, once you set up the provision on your host, then it knows where to ask for the data, and then it goes to the service bus, Power BI site does, to make that connection to authenticate the user. So you log into your Power BI with your organizational account. That's what it uses. All right, so like I said, it's not for everybody. It's kind of a unique situation where you've got the right users in place. All the rest of this stuff can be used. You don't have to use publish to the cloud. This is what it looks like if you go end to end. So are there any questions before I go into a demo?
Can you go back 2 slides?
This one?
The discovery and ETA, oh, that's SSIM, so never mind.
Yeah, they claim that Power Query is the mini SSIS. It's pretty powerful, but gosh, it does allow you to append tables and merge tables on the fly now. You can actually, when you're looking at one table, say, oh, I want another one, and what am I going to merge it on? It's pretty nice, but yeah. Any questions? Other questions? Okay. Let me pull. Aren't they sweet? All right, so I'll just show the admin portal real quick since I was just talking about that. So this is Office 365, and this is managing the data sources for Power BI sites. So we've got 2 gateways at Kaizen. Pretty small resolution. As you can see, shows which version. The credential store is local on the BI server. Here's our certificate info that we can install on a different host if we need to, if this other one crashes. And in 1.4, they actually added these instances. So I can add multiple instances of gateways under the one host. The data sources, the cool thing about this is, of course, you've got your SQL connection, your Oracle, with ADO and OLADB, but you've got this data source called Power Query. So if you've got a user that's gone through Power Query and set up all this stuff, and he's got all these queries that mash up together in his data model, he can just give you one connection string. I don't know how they do this, but it parses every query in his workbook and will tell you if a connection is already set up for that. If not, you work through the process and set it up, and it's good to go to refresh it on Office 365. Let's just look at one of these. Here's a Power Query that's set up.
Is that SQL server with SSIS or is this all?
SSAS is not possible through the gateway. Now, it's kind of weird because SSAS is available both multidimensional and tabular on the Power Query tab. If you just want to keep it local, it's there, and it's actually pretty awesome. So this is where you just set up easy cloud access. Do I want it to be searchable, in my organization within the Power Query search? And here's where you enable the OData feed. You don't have to. It does help. This is just shows you the different connection types, OLEDB or SQL Server. You can actually set up a connection directly in here if you know what you're looking at. The data settings, if you've got your OData, the data settings, if you've got an OData feed, it will actually ask you which tables you want exposed. If it's got geography data in it, it cannot be exposed in the OData feed, and if it's got all nullable columns, it can't be exposed. And this just says who can find it and who can refresh it. Well, everybody at Kaizen can look for this. So that's how the owner of the company wanted it. Okay. So let's go look at one of the sites that does this. So here's my portal for what I'm doing. I can look at my data. And see that, hey, look, somebody used my query in April. So exciting. Right. So this is where you can start to understand, all right, if I'm going to make a change, am I going to affect anybody? Well, there's just one bar chart, so it's just me. Awesome. I'll show you what the refreshable content looks like. So this is just their demo site that we've added stuff to, and it's a lot like a SharePoint site. You throw in your document and you say enable for Power BI. You can schedule your data refresh from here. Now, Microsoft always talks about the one source of the truth. This refreshes at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the account executives look at it all day. They're not refreshing on their own, and they're not having a different story. That's why we did it this way. You can add it to Q&A here, and then let's look at the report. So you can see this was updated 6 hours ago at 6 a.m. And all this is just a matrix that the boss wanted to show the account executives, right? So you can come in here and look at each month and see how we're doing towards our goals. Nothing too exciting, but it's the one source of the truth for the account executives, and they can access it anywhere. They can hit it with their mobile apps too. So now let me show you kind of the stuff within Excel. So I have downloaded and added Power Query. So one of the things that's confusing is, hey, here I am. There's my personal account. There's my Kaizen account. But wait a minute. In Power Query, I've got another one. So within Power Query, you sign in with your organizational account, and this is what allows you to publish and search for stuff within your organization. Just something to be aware of. If this says sign in, you won't be able to search within your organization. So here's the workbook queries. So let's look at what's in here. All we've got is a date dimension. Can't access from here because I'm not in my network. and rental multidimensional cube. So this is for a rental company. So let's just look at the query. Cool thing about this is everything you do is basically within Power Query is like setting up a macro. So you've got these query settings. I liken this to Photoshop history. You can go back in time and make a change. So if I wanted to know, well, where did this come from? What came from this table? What did I do? Well, I drilled into it. Then I said, well, first row is header. If it's got a settings icon, you can actually go in and change what's happening. This is just some conditional logic about what to count when it's rented or not. Fairly straightforward. What it does, this is called the M language. So another fun thing, now you've got DAX to learn, now you've got M, but it's fairly straightforward. But what this means is, if you get good at your queries, you can build them on your own. So this is basically each step over here and the properties and calculations and measures in each one. So if you get to know what you're doing, you can basically just write this. You know, if you copy this and this crashes, you can paste this into another Power Query and it just goes through all the steps and it's set up for you. You know what, it hasn't lately, now that they've offered this preview, I guess they think this is generally workable now, but yeah, sometimes. So you can actually go back and retrace my steps and change anything if you don't like exactly what I've done. Now you can do a lot of transformations. Unpivot. Anyway, the coolest thing is if you've got a lot of dates across the top, you can set it to unpivot. And if it sees if this is updated with a new column, the next time it looks at this data, it'll just keep unpivoting that data. It's pretty nice. No, and right now they're the only thing that gives you any sort of IntelliSense or feedback is the Power BI Designer right now. But they are going to roll that, when they roll that into 2016, yes, you'll have a little bit better experience. You know, so if I go into the settings for the conditional branch, the only thing it tells me is, hey, no errors. Where at Ignite, they had the version where it actually shows you where your area is, like SSMS. It gives you a little red squiggle and stuff. So you can add columns too, so you don't have to add everything within Power Pivot. Let me do it on time. This is what gets updated a lot, is this functionality here. If I find a date, I can actually do subtraction. So if I click on another date, I can do a subtraction, do the age. Subtraction was added maybe 2 weeks ago. So you can do date and time stuff, your obvious other statistical stuff, which is fine. And then obviously this is basically just Notepad, and all it gives you is the error. So that's the repeatable steps to that. Sure. Let me just show you Power Pivot real quick, since you're asking about that. So one thing you might not think of, and maybe you haven't even noticed, is reporting properties and language. I don't know if you guys have even noticed this, but basically, it's kind of like hide from client tools. You can go in here and set the default field set. So what are they going to see when they do their queries? What's the table behavior? So what's the identifier? One cool thing is if you've got a card visualization, you can set the default image for each row. What's it going to show? And then synonyms. And this is basically what do I want to call stuff? Now, right now, this is just nothing, but you can basically do a comma separated list of what your users call these things, like branch. You know, some people were calling it division, some people were calling it store. Put that in there in a comma delimited list. It will actually rate it based on where it is in that list. So if you've got something that maybe two different fields that they call the same thing, you can put priority by having the one name earlier in your list. So let's go look at the, I just can't see stuff. No. Okay. So I'll do that in BI preview. See, this is me. I'll log out of this because I don't have anything cool to show you. Pull it back up. One thing that they're getting a little bit better at is the ability to use different users. Signing out is terrible. So, see, now it gives me a list of people that I've actually accessed this site with. Okay, so let's see if I can. So you can access data straight from here if you want to and start building stuff with limited functionality. If you upload a workbook to your OneDrive for Business, it's there. Here's the direct connection to the analysis services, and then all the rest is basically cloud-enabled data. The CRM says, yes, you can do it if it's no data feed, but only if it's a cloud no data feed. You can't set up a no data feed for your CRM on site. I tried, it didn't work. But these are added weekly as well. I think at Ignite, however you want to say it, I think they had 22 now. So this is just the data sets and the reports if you've created them already. So just an example, here's just a slicer. You can cut it and it shows you everything. Not much change in their utilization, what's being rented over the time. But if, I know they're class 2, I think. Maybe they're class 3. So this just kind of shows you the interactivity of it. Got different pages set up for it. Here's their inventory. If you've got a relative date measure, you just say whenever it's refreshed, show me what day it is. One of the cool things they've done now, though, is see where it's leading back to rental. So this is my dashboard. So this is things that are just things that I've pinned. What they've added a week and a half ago is the ability to go, so I'm clicked on rental, I can go into accounts receivable or whatever, and if I see something that matters to me, and it, that rental table. So this kind of gives you the ability to drill down into different reports. And this is why the CIOs and CEOs love it. They can get their quick view. What have I made? What's my maintenance to income cost? Oh, look, here's accounts receivable, and it takes you to that accounts receivable report. Now, there's some cool stuff you can do with drill down with the matrices, but it's fairly slow, and you have to climb all the way back up the ladder if you get drill down fairly deeply. This dashboard is mine. I can share it with others. So if I shared it with somebody, they can actually, if they were on this page, they wouldn't even refresh. All of a sudden, they've got a new open. They'll see me dragging it around. But yeah, this is actually a client, so I'm going to get rid of that. But, okay, so here's question and answer. So here we've got maintenance to income. Profit. Let's do profit. I don't know. Profit So all I did was type profit, and there's something in there called equipment category, and it says, maybe you want to see it by this. Now, maybe not. So I would say total profit. Okay, so that gets me, I know, maybe last. So see, it's got IntelliSense where it's the bottom here last month, last week. I don't think I have anything for that. Early development machine. But maybe I did want to look at profit, maybe not by equipment category, but maybe by branch. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 doesn't really have rental, I know, so that's a little weird. They do rent out battery chargers, so they actually made some pretty good money renting out battery chargers. But so maybe I want to look at equipment. So it says, oh, EQ, equipment category, so I'll just click it and see what it gives me. And I want to know what's been rented. So it tries to assume what's the best way to visualize what you're asking for. Now I could go back, you hover over, it's got that interoperability. So profit by branch where equipment is or 2. Or I think it's B8. So wow.
Those wires of charts, or is that doing that on its own?
Doing it on its own. The main thing you have to set up is within your data model, if it's what type, not a data type, but what type of data it is. So if it's a date or a city or a, kind of like that regional information, you have to tell it that, and then you have to give it a synonym. Now this, there's nothing I did other than it's just reading the field names, and I know which field names to ask for, right? But if you know your data, that's what you're going to be asking it anyway.
So, profit or margin, then to make a look.
Yep. And it shows you what you're using. So if you've got a conflict and it, for whatever reason, even if you've named branch or store, the first thing in that list for that field, for that column, conflicting with something else because it just doesn't know how to show you that, then you would go in and change your system. And then see, I can pin that right back. So now, when I go back to my dashboard, right now there's only 3 sizes of dashlets. So now when I come back, you know, these took me down into the report down here. This will take me to Q&A, and it'll show me what I asked. Not only what I asked it, but what it thought I asked, right? So it takes me right. So if I had done EQ, it would take me right back to that same text. So let's look real quick. How are we doing? Maybe a couple more minutes on this. So this is where it gets kind of fun. If I've shared this and allowed them, so that's the 2 things. I'm sharing it with them and I'm going to allow them to edit this report. They can actually come in here and here's their pick list. So they can start to drag stuff on here. Know what this makes sense, but let's look at this. Here's their timesheet data. Let's look at, drag it over here and see what it does. All right, it showed it as that, but let's look at something else, maybe a pie chart. And let's give it job code. All right, so, you know, you can just start dragging stuff around to kind of start digging into the data. Of course, pie charts are not good visualizations unless you're looking for halves and quarters. Remember that, please. But yeah, you can see that this is fairly quartered out by job codes. If you don't like it, just get rid of it. And if somebody were online with me, they'd actually be seeing that interactivity. They watch you build it. And this is the preview. This will be $9 on top of Office 365, or there's a free version where you can just look at data. The one thing they can't do right now, it can only be shared and edited both by internal users. Can't say, look at this dashboard I've created for my customers, come look and see how you're doing. They know that's a concern and they're working on it, but you know, it's a security concern too. So they're trying to figure out how to do that. And that's one of the biggest things I get is, that's awesome, I want my customers to use it. And Microsoft's answer is have them use Office 365 and then you push your data out with some sort of third-party SharePoint management system. All right, any other questions now that you've kind of seen the demo?
You don't seem completely sold on it to me.
It's not for everybody. It's just not. I mean, we've struggled internally because our boss loves the latest and greatest and he wants it now and it's in preview, right? So it crashes a lot. But then there's a pretty big international company and they're rolling it out to all their dealers already. This is what you're going to use. If you want to see your data, this is what you're going to get. So and the nice thing about this is it's fairly intuitive and it gives you the ability to drill down if you need it. You don't have to set up SSRS for it. You know, yeah, there's caveats to everything. And of course, we're from the SQL, the data platform world, so it is kind of a paradigm shift to say, here, user, do all your work, right? So.
Data context on drills. So if you click on January, set it up so that you would see a report of that data in a different view just for January.
Yep. So it actually gives you your filters for the page. If I just wanted to filter the chart, like honestly, they had a year-to-date demand, and I cheated. I just said the last 12 months but just for this year. So that's a quick and dirty way to do year-to-date calculations. And I just put the filters on there. I didn't want to go into Power Pivot and create some year-to-date measure. From here? No. Yeah, then you're talking about, well, you can if you're in, if you set up your dashboard, you can go to all sorts of different reports. And that's what they added about a week and a half ago. So, right, like I said, if I go to work orders, now I can look at different things. If I pin this to my rentals dashboard, or say I've got executive dashboard, they can drill into all the reports. And I think that's it, unless there's any other questions.
Hey, John, back to the question, sorry, I had to step out.
Yeah.
Back to the question about like stability and stuff.
Yes.
You kind of get the impression that you're somewhat dealing with like reporting services 1.0 and SharePoint 2001.
It's not quite like that, but yeah.
Time, right?
No, it's not.
Yeah. That's what I struggle with trying to show it to people. You know? Everybody asks that question. The two questions I get asked are, well, how secure is my data? They're not wow. And how stable is it?
Yeah. And compound that by the fact that they've got 2 branches of development for it. So, yeah.
You Microsoft Core Data Zen. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean.
You know, the other challenge, rapid deployment of changes to the tools is cool if you're a developer. It's not if you're not. To have changes show up in it every week. It's kind of a challenge.
Yeah.
I think sometimes. So I don't know if there's a way to manage that. Definitely cool technology. I'm just not sure.
Yeah, and I don't even know.
Quite ready for prime time.
So like the designer is updated probably bi-weekly.
Yeah.
And so if you share a designer file with somebody that's got last week's version, what's that do?
Yeah. I think some changes are breaking, a lot are not. But I
Right.
think some do. All right, other questions for John? All right, John, appreciate you.
Thanks.
Presenting to us.